Well, good morning everybody. It is time for Introduction to Criminology here this morning, and I am looking for the box where I can put in my chat. I see, I'm trying to load it in here. Can put that in. And I see we have one person. I'm going to give people time to join in. I'm wishing you a good morning. It is 6:51 here in Arizona. So I am speaking to you from an entirely different time zone, and the people I'm staying with are still asleep, so I can't get all adamant like I usually do and just let it all hang out. But I'm excited. I'm excited for us to get back together and, start making some great things happen. Criminology, by the way, is one of my favorite classes. The first time I ever taught it was, in fact, in 1992. The first time I taught it was the month in which, or the time in which the Rodney King incident went down, that actually changed the way in which all of criminal justice took place. Now, I'm not sure, would you all mind, those of you who are joining in so I can start taking attendance, when you hop in, would you mind putting in the comment section that you're here? I'm seeing that my comment section for some reason is not working. I'm trying to get it to work. But in any case, well, there you go. It is not working for me, but maybe it's working for you. In any case, later in the class period, I will be discussing our assignments, a lot of the things that we need to know. Let me take a look at, I can take a look at that later. I'll post an announcement as to what your assignment is for next week. It looks like what you're going to be writing about next week, it is in the syllabus. Please tell your friends to look at that syllabus. I don't do that for mere exercise. I do that so that everyone can know exactly what's taking place. The other thing is that I noticed that with the assignments that were submitted, it wasn't a hard assignment, so people were really pressured and feeling a lot of strain as far as submitting that assignment. It was a very simple one. Who am I? Who are they? And a quick paragraph. But in any case, try to submit in Blackboard, because what I noticed was it was 100 times easier for me to grade and read through your papers that were submitted on Blackboard. We have a major problem with attendance, and so since you're here, I'm really glad that you are here, but I don't understand where the confusion is as to when we meet, given that the syllabus has the exact date in which every live stream is going to take place. I'm completely confused by that, but the 4 of you are here, and that makes me happy. So let me just see if I can get 6 of you are here. That's awesome. Let me just see why the comment section isn't working here. It's not working on mine. Have any of you tried to, will one of you, somebody, please text me on my 755 number and tell me if you've tried to put in your, what do you call it, your, you know what, just go ahead and text me while we're talking. Text me at 305-755-2579. That is 305-755-2579. Text me now so that I know that you're on this live stream and I can take attendance. All right. Please do not ask me in the future when we live stream again. I'm answering this 100 times a day, and it's all in the syllabus. The other thing is, please look at the syllabus for your assignments. It's all spelled out. And now, if you're confused by what the assignment's asking, no problem with that. Feel free to ask. However, to ask me at this point in time, where can I find the assignment? It's right there. I don't know how else to answer it. And most of you got it, so I don't understand. There's a few people who say that they haven't gotten the syllabus, but it was sent in an email to everyone. So if there's still a problem, you can contact me. But go ahead and shoot me over your attendance at 305-755-2579. Let me just go ahead and start in here. I'm going to start with this whole idea, and I'm glad that the video is actually working, because the video didn't work yesterday. It ended up that we actually did a radio show for my human behavior class. I fixed it, but I didn't know exactly what was going on. But what I really want to discuss really right now is this whole idea of what is exactly human nature. Because when we take a look at human nature, you know, we're taking a look at something that is vitally important for us to understand crime, right? I mean, if we take a look at what is human nature, there's, you know, we can take a look at it in several ways. And I wish that the freaking comment section was working right now. Of course, it's not, and I don't understand why it's not. But if we take a look at it, some people would say, and a lot of people say this when we watch the news, don't we? A lot of people say that people are inherently evil. People are greedy. People are mean. People are selfish. People are, you know, bastards to one another. Well, if a person has that perspective, then what we're really taking a look at is what Thomas Hobbes, Hobbes, he makes the argument that people are inherently bad, right? And because of that, we have to have laws to protect one another from each other. That's just a fundamental component of, you know, criminology or even criminal justice. Then, if we want to take a look at the opposite side, we can say actually people are born pretty good. They're born a blank slate, and when they're born, they're misled. That's how they end up in crime. So what we have to do is we have to create laws so that people don't get misled and they don't get misdirected along the way. And if we do that, then what we're going to find is that we can actually do something about crime by changing the system, right? Because if we say that crime is based upon individuals being misled, what we're really saying is that crime is a sickness. It's external to the person. So, for example, if someone passes away from coronavirus, it wasn't something that was inside of them. It wasn't some inherent evil disease that cultivated within their body. It was something that came from the outside, right? So if we take a look at crime in the same capacity, then what we would say is external forces cause persons to engage in crime, so they're inherently good. So what that would mean is this: if you believe that people are bad, then you create laws to punish those people, right? If you believe that people are inherently good, then you create laws so that we can rehabilitate people. So in other words, when we take a look at crime and we take a look at the way in which we handle people, the way in which we interpret people, the way in which they're defined, it's really based upon what our definition of human nature is, right? And then our definition, the thing that's really important about that is that definitions create for us our sense of common sense, right? And I think that if you were on the 9/11 call, and I don't know if you were or weren't, but on 9/11, I did an impromptu. Someone had asked me if I would just go ahead and do a quick little lecture on the significance of 9/11. And one of the things that we discussed was this whole idea of what is common sense? Where does common sense come from? Why do we have common sense, right? And then what we really realized, and I know you realize this for a fact, most people don't have it, right? Because, you know, that makes some assumptions about thinking in general. And we know that most people don't think exactly alike. And so therefore, how can there ever be a common sense? By the way, when we take a look at common sense, I wish I could type in the comment board. I don't know what's going on with this technology all the time. But if we were to take a look at, wait a minute, what's this over here? What is this box? Let me just see here. Common sense. Send feedback. Nah, brother, I don't know what this is. I don't know why my comment box isn't working on YouTube. But in any case, what is common sense? Common sense really is a shared way of thinking, I suppose. Okay? And if we take a look at it, and you take a look at where did your common sense come from, your personal common sense, right? It probably came from where? It probably came from your socialization. Who are the people, who are your parents, who are your brothers, who are your sisters, who are your friends, especially when you're young? Who are these people that socialize us to become a part of the society in which we live? Who are they, right? Because what's going to happen is that the way in which we look at the world, at least initially, is going to be shaped by the people who are closest to us, right? They're called primary socialization agents. So our primary socialization agents, that is the first ones who socialize us, are the ones who give us our behavior, or who give us our belief systems. Now, we can have several belief systems, and what I believe is, and I wish the comment box, because I'd like to ask you a question right now, but I'll have to give you the answer. What is the function of common sense? What does it do for us, right? And those of you who are going to be signing out midway through class, I'm going to be taking attendance again at the later part and discussing some things that you'll need to know. But in any case, if we take a look at it, common sense is very important because it does something very special for us. It allows us to fit into environments that we understand, right? So if we were to, for example, when you go from high school into college, it's not a major transition, is it? You go from being in a classroom to being in a classroom. You go from having a teacher teach you to having a professor or a teacher teach you, right? So when we go from high school into college, it tends to be a very pretty simple transition. Why? Because our common sense allows us to understand the system and the structure that we're entering into. Let me just write something down here so I don't forget. And then, sorry, just something that dawned on me based upon the textbooks that we have for this class and stuff like that. So anyway, what common sense does is it allows us to fit into a familiar environment. Now me, you see, I always have my Buckeye hat on, always, right? And the reason I wear a bandana, by the way, is so when my forehead sweats when I'm out in this hot sun, you know, I don't want my hat to get all sweaty, so I wear the bandana so that the sweat doesn't ruin my cap, because I hate buying cap after cap after cap. So I wear the bandana, right? Now Ohio State, for those of you who like football, and it doesn't matter if you don't like football, if I'm the coach at Ohio State, my job is to find somebody who has the best common sense to fit into our system, right? So what we do is we go recruit players that will understand our playbook quickly, who will understand our culture, who will understand our coaching techniques immediately, right? So if we take a look at athleticism, there are a lot of people who never played formal athletics who are fantastic athletes, right? If you go to a playground in any city in America, even some farm areas, you will find people who have these incredible skills, but they didn't play formal sports. So if you're going to go to Ohio State and play football, right, we want somebody who understands the language of the plays. We want somebody who understands the language of the culture. We want someone who understands the language of hard work and discipline when you're in the weight room, when it's 100 degrees outside and you have to run 3, 4, 5, 6 miles and then go to practice. We want someone to understand the reason why we do all that. So what these coaches do is they go out and they recruit somebody who has the common sense to fit into the system. It's the same with basketball. It's the same as everything. And essentially what that is it allows us to have solidarity. So common sense is really important because what common sense does is it allows us to fit in. And that's really nice, right? Because on a given day, how many of you are not trying to fit in? How many of you actively go out and you try to find situations where you don't fit in? You go and you try to find situations where people are going to ridicule you. How many of you wake up in the day and say, God, if I could go out and just make a few more enemies, my life would be so much better, right? If I could wake up and be poor, oh my God, that'd be great, right? Instead, we go out and we try to find persons that we mesh with, people that we have camaraderie with. Because when we do that, typically when we fit in with other people who are much like ourselves, then we feel a sense of peace, right? We feel a sense of calm, and we feel a sense of belonging to something. By the way, this is why people join street gangs. They don't join street gangs. Well, they might, some, because they're inherently evil, as Thomas Hobbes would say, but they're also not inherently good. What they're really looking for is a sense of belonging. And in looking for belonging, what do? They gravitate to persons who are much like themselves. Typically, these are persons who are defined as troublemakers. These are persons who have been displaced from the social order. And these are persons who effectively come together so that they can have, a shared identity so they can continue to strive and thrive within a particular environment. So we take a look at street gangs. Really what they're exercising is this need to belong. Now, what's interesting is that when they're in the gang, their common sense may be different than the community in which they belong to. Correct? Right? I believe that's correct, because I'm not sure that the old heads, the adults in those neighborhoods, really look as favorably on the street gangs as the street gangs do. In other words, here's what happens. Once your common sense fits in with the street gang and you can adapt to that situation, right, you, by definition, become at odds with those persons who are the traditional order, who have a different set of common sense. So what happens is, and this is really vitally important, is what happens is once we buy into a common sense perspective, we become divided. Okay? And what you're seeing in the nation right now, and this is a criminological idea, what you are witnessing with all the protests and with the Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, Lives Matter, you know, when you're taking a look at all this, what you're really looking at is common sense that is based upon something really important. And what is that thing that's important? What we're talking about is that common sense is based upon, right, three things. One, experience. What is your personal experience? What is it like associating with persons who are much like yourself, right? And they tell you the same kind of stories. Word of mouth, it's called word of mouth. When you have word of mouth activity and it reinforces what you already believe. By the way, we actively pursue people who share our common sense perspective, right? It's called selective perception. Some of you watch Fox News. Some of you watch CNN. Some of you don't watch any, right? If you're watching Fox News, it's likely that you have a very specific type of mindset, right? You have a very specific perspective. If you're watching Fox, you have a very specific perspective. Now, what's interesting is that both of them have a common sense view of the same event, right? So what happens is that we gravitate to and we select information that reinforces what we already believe. Therefore, we never question our common sense. See, that's where common sense is problematic. See, once we establish common sense as our philosophical position on life, then we no longer critique it, right? We no longer become critical thinkers. Instead, we just passively exist what people say that reinforces what we already believe we know. And the fact of the matter is, everything is socially constructed. Nothing exists in and of itself. Anyone who tells you that, it's not true, right? So the first thing is word of mouth. The second source of common sense is the media. How does the media, portray crime? How does media portray these different groups, right? How does the media portray the protesters? How does it portray the police? How does it portray the victims? Every decision that is made by the media is an editorial decision, right? There's nothing inherent in the fact. What they do is they build a narrative. They build a discourse that shapes the way in which you interpret the event. None of you were there. Not one of you were there. There's not one crime where you were present that you actually witnessed it, that's been on the news. And also, none of you, even if you did witness it, you don't have all the evidence as to what took place. So here we are in the public, and we follow the news, and the news tells us, depending on which one we're following, which philosophical position we're following, it tells us what to think. And you, by being a person of common sense, you listen to what they say and you say, yeah, that's exactly right. Those persons shouldn't be protesting. Or yeah, those persons should be protesting. Right? We have free speech. Or do we have free speech? So in other words, here's what amazing starts to happen. Is that as the media continues to pounce upon us the nature of information, we are by definition forced to listen to what they say. Right? Look at it. It doesn't matter what channel you're watching. They pick the exact same events and they talk about it. There are billions of events that take place in a given day. But we narrow our scope of all these events down to 2 or 3. Everything is coronavirus. Doesn't mean it's not important. Everything is George Floyd. Doesn't mean it's not important. But it does mean that there's other things that are taking place that we should be cognizant of, we should be aware of. But what happens is that when they start selecting for us the information that we're going to be indoctrinated to, when we are introduced to certain information, that becomes our worldview, right? And so, all of a sudden now, our common sense believes that the world is a lot more dangerous than it ever has been. That's a common sense perspective, baby. It's been going on forever. My mother used to tell me when I was a kid, it's worse now than it was back then. And after that, I didn't say it, but my ex-wife used to tell my kids, oh, it's worse now than it ever has been. Now parents are saying it's worse now than it ever has been. And here's the thing, that's just a common sense perspective. Because it's not worse now than it ever has been. It all depends on the baseline, right? What is the point of comparison? And let's not use 2020 because homicide rates have gone up, but let's go back to like 2018, which is only 2 years ago. If you look at 2017, 2018, the homicide rate in the United States was as low as it was in the 1950s, right? But most people are sitting here saying, oh my God, it's so violent, right? The world's gone crazy. Well, it has and it hasn't, right? The world's always been crazy. But the question is, how crazy was it? Right? So if we go back and we start to take a look at the data, for example, Miami, everyone's like, oh my God, Miami's so dangerous, Miami's this and that. Miami's not that dangerous. It depends on what you're comparing it to, right? The homicide rate in Miami is higher than it is on the national average, right? As of last year, we had the lowest rate of homicide in Miami since 56, at 9 per 100,000. During the Cocaine Cowboys, it was 56 per 100,000, right? So in the 1980s, it was 8, 6, 7 times higher than it is now. And if you take a look at Miami as a super dangerous place, let me tell you what, my hometown, Toledo, Ohio, is 3 times, 4 times more dangerous in terms of the rate of homicide than Miami. But you're not sitting there thinking about how dangerous Toledo is. You're not sitting there thinking about, oh my God, East St. Louis, never drive through East St. Louis. You're not thinking about New Orleans, you're not thinking about Baltimore, you're not thinking about Detroit or LA. Well, LA's got a relatively low crime rate, homicide rate. But what we're looking at is our perspective is shaped by the people around us. Every freaking time we turn on the news in Miami, someone's getting shot and killed, right? And then we go through this thing where there's always a teenager. But the fact of the matter is, on average, only 2 to 4 teenagers get shot and killed in Miami. Now, most of the people who get shot and killed are between the ages of 18 and 24. But the question is, why do we focus overwhelmingly on the teenagers? Because it's directing our attention towards our policies, right? Kids have gone to hell. It reinforces this idea that young people are the threat, and they're threatened. And by focusing our attention there and not on 18 to 24, if we're not focusing on 18 to 24, then here's what we don't have to focus on. Now we don't have to focus on education. Now we don't have to focus on unemployment. Now we don't have to focus on economics. If we focus on the kids, then we don't have to focus over here. Common sense, baby. So your perspective, most of our perspectives on violent crime especially, is shaped from media sources. Then here's the third. Here's the third source of our perspective on crime. Politics, right? Politics. Politicians. Politicians, they're here to get your vote, man. They're not here to give you truth. They're here to get your vote. And they will contextualize whatever information is necessary to get your vote. Why do they have polls? Why do they do, what do they call them, focus groups? Why do they do focus groups? Why do they do the polls? Why do they go out and interview people? Why do they do exit polling? And the reason is because they want to know what's going to make you vote in a particular direction. Okay? So they selectively pick out the information that is going to basically excite their constituency base. And in the meantime, it reinforces or it negates what you already believe. So what are you doing? You're constantly being bombarded with somebody else's interpretation of what's going on in the world. And here's what happens. And this is beautiful, right? Everything then is socially constructed. What that means is, for something to become reality, we have to come to a common agreement that it's real, right? So, I'm sitting in a chair. You and I could look at this chair and we can say, yep, indeed, that's a chair, right? We socially constructed this as a chair. But we could turn it into a ping pong table if we wanted to. It'd be a very small one, but we could do it. We could turn it into a sled if there's snow outside, right? We can use it as a ladder. In other words, we can reconstruct the definition of this chair, of this desk, right? If we were in a classroom, right, we'd be sitting there, you'd all be facing front, which means that life is structured, okay? If you take a look at a classroom and all the seats are facing forward, that means there's a structure, there's a pattern of behavior that shapes the way in which we believe. Back when I used to teach deterrence theory, I'd take that classroom, I'd move all the chairs, we'd put Nerf basketball hoops on both sides of the room, and we'd play basketball. Sometimes, and I still do this, is that we play music in class so that, you know, we can set things off. But I use it to show common sense, right? So we can turn it into a dance studio. We can do that. We can turn it into Thanksgiving dinner and make it into a restaurant. We can make it into a hall. We can make it into a basketball court. We can sit around in a circle, and we can do, we can make it into a camp scene. So there's nothing inherent in that classroom that makes it a classroom. What makes it a classroom is that we socially construct the definition that it's a classroom. Why? Why do we socially construct things? So we can fit in, right? So your common sense is socially constructed. You don't even exist. My name is Schwaner, right? People call me Schwaneezy. You can call me Schwaneezy. That's my nickname. I've had it since 1999. A basketball player from University of Louisville gave me that nickname. So when someone says Schwaneezy, I answer. If somebody says Ween, I answer. If somebody says Schwan Schwizzle, I answer. If somebody says, I don't know, Alibaba, I answer. The 40 Thieves, I answer. Right? I'm constantly answering all these things. Why? Because when they socially constructed these nicknames, they were attributing them to me, and I interpret them as real. So the reason you have a name is not so much as an identity marker. The reason you have a name is so we can socially construct your identity, right? So that when I act in a way towards you, you react in a way towards me because you now are real, right? So what happens is that we are all constantly in this process of socially constructing what is real. Now, we take this common sense idea, because I don't think there is such thing as common sense. I really don't. I think we have experience that helps us define the world in which we live, and I think a lot of times, you know, it's kind of like the fish in water. Does the fish really see the water, right? Do you really see your culture, or do you interpret that you see your culture? Because I have a suspicion that culture and structure, that is patterns of behavior, shape you, and we don't even know that they shape you. And we'll get to that here in a second. Now, how do I know that common sense shapes your perspective on crime? I've been doing this a long time, baby. I started, the first time I taught criminology was in 1992. All right? And I've been doing the same exercise since then. List for me the first 3 crimes that come to your mind. Well, if the law of numbers is real, and what the law of numbers is that if it happens most often, then that should be what we're thinking about, right? If there's a crime that happens all the time, shouldn't the first crime we think of be the one that occurs most often? And the fact of the matter is, it is not. For 30 years, 92% of all my students have said murder. One of their 3 has always been murder. Then a lot of people will follow with robbery, and then they'll follow with rape. So they'll take what are called street crimes, because they're street crimes. And our attention regarding crime is always towards the streets. That's common sense, right? It's ideological. So the ideology of the media and politicians send us right to the streets where we think about street crime, namely homicide and violent crime. Okay, but really, if you're really thinking about crimes that happen most often, you should be thinking about larceny, theft. Some of you did put down larceny, theft, but larceny, theft should be the crime you think of, or drug violations. Drug violations should be the crime that you think about every time. But typically, we think in terms of the big 3: robbery, rape, and homicide. Now, that's really important, because when we think that it's worse now than it was in the past, and when they thought it was worse than it was in the past, they call this the pestilence perspective, the pestilence theory. I can't write it out because the comment board is not working. Pestilence, P-E-S-T-I-L-E-N-C-E. It means things are always worse than they were in the generation before. And we've always had this perspective that it's always worse now than it was in the past. And as long as we have that perspective, when politicians become politicians, they assume positions of power. What typically happens is they make legislation that makes conditions worse, right? They make it worse. And there's a reason for it. It's because they're trying to get votes. They're not trying to solve the issue. So they look at things as worse, and then they'll go ahead, like for example, Donald Trump is using a law and order campaign. That's not right or wrong. It doesn't matter if you support him or you don't. Law and order is a perspective that is Hobbesian, right? It is a conservative perspective that people are inherently evil. And a lot of people believe that. They did in the 70s when we got tough in the 70s, we created these get tough policies. Those get tough policies were all based upon the idea that people are inherently evil. They're inherently criminal. Why? Because in the 1960s there was so much chaos. So things don't just happen. They happen within a context. On the other hand, some people say, well, you got to take a look at where these people come from, and you got to take a look at their environment. These people aren't inherently bad. I mean, I grew up with street gangs and drug dealers. I know it. These people aren't any more inherently bad than the people in my private school. But the problem is that they had these structural conditions, right? Patterns of behavior that led them into crime. If you changed the structures, you could have changed their criminal behavior for a lot of them. And the people in my school were engaging in crime. It's just they were able to deflect it away from trouble. So the question is the behavior different, or is the interpretation of the behavior different, right? It's tied to labeling theory. Those of you who have a textbook, basically, when you apply the label troublemaker to a particular group of people, like the Roughnecks, I'm using The Saints and the Roughnecks by William Chambliss. If we define the Roughnecks as the threat, then guess where we're going to direct our police attention? To those who are regarded as a threat. If we say that the Saints are just sowing their wild oats, then what do? Then we kind of give them a pass so that they can continue on their quest to go to college or whatever. But these persons over here, the Roughnecks, what we do, we punish them. So the label gets applied. Roughneck is a label, or troublemaker. We process them differently than we process the good kid who just had a bad day, right? By the way, this is tied to the opioid addiction. Look, in the 1970s, all right, when heroin addiction and overdose was an urban phenomenon, what did we do? It was disproportionately urban, African-American male. We sent those men to prison. They were addicted to opioids. They were dying from opioids, but we sent them to prison. Now that the opioid addiction issue is middle-class white America, what do? We say we need to rehabilitate. These are good people who have gone bad. But when in the 1970s, it was bad people who were doing bad. You see how the philosophical difference has an impact on the way in which we handle and treat people? It has a direct impact, right? Now, let's go even further. Now I'm 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm getting juiced up already. Here we go. Oh, shoot, here we go. Did I say shit? Whatever. You SAS students, excuse that language. So here we go. Now, here's where it gets really interesting to me. So I ask you, give me some social and demographic characteristics. Where would you go? Where would you go to find this criminal? People said, Detroit. You would be right. Because having grown up 50 miles south of Detroit in Toledo, yeah, Detroit was rough. I didn't like going to Detroit. I was never a big fan of Detroit. But, you know, I went there to watch baseball. But I didn't do much more than that. Because, shoot, Detroit had me a little bit nervous. I can't even lie to you. Because Detroit has a high crime rate. Right? So we have that kind of thing going on. What was my point? Sorry, I got so many things running through my head that I want to cover. Oh, okay. You go to Detroit. Some said go to Overtown. A couple of you said Florida City, right? In other words, we go to these places that reinforce the idea of the street. But here's where I find things that are really interesting when we talk about social and demographic characteristics. Many of you said that one of the characteristics of the criminal is that they are crazy, right? That they have mental health issues, that they're imbalanced. And if you watch the crime shows on TV, right, we're always looking at this polarity between the rational legal rational justice system, right, law and order, versus the mental health deranged people who are criminals, right? We're always, when it comes to criminals, here's what's interesting. We want to know what's in the criminal mind, right? What's in their freaking mind? Why did they do it? Why did they do it? That's what I want to know. I want to know what made them click. What made that serial killer just trip out, right? That's fine. It's interesting. But there's a major, major, major problem when we start to think that the criminal offender is insane or the criminal offender is crazy. Because here's what it does, right? What it does is it deflects attention away from structure. It's true, it's a statistical fact that persons who are unemployed have higher rates of arrest. Persons who live in poverty have higher rates of arrest. Doesn't mean they're more crime prone, that's a different thing. Persons who are urban have higher rates of arrest. So are we saying that there's something genetic in the environment, or are we saying that there's something about the environment that shapes the nature and the direction of behavior, right? If there's genetic, if there's a criminal mind that is tied to violent crime, then there should be no variation whether you live in a rural area or an urban area in terms of the rate of crime, right? If it's genetic and it's built into the genetic makeup and the craziness is genetic, right, then it should be completely random as to who becomes a criminal offender. But there is no randomness to it, and we'll talk about it later. It is a completely structured event. there are definite patterns as to how violence expresses itself. So when we focus on the individual mind, what we do is we deflect attention away from us because, after all, quote unquote, we're all healthy, right? So we can't be doing anything bad. And isn't it amazing when we take a look at these persons who have these perfect lives and they turn to opioids or they turn to crime, we say, oh, I can't believe it was my child. I can't believe it was somebody that, someone in this neighborhood. You know why? Because we're so busy worrying about those people over there having a crazy mind that we forget that maybe it's something different. Maybe it's context. Maybe it's not the crazy. And maybe it's structural, right? Think about it. We socially construct these definitions of who a criminal is, who's a threat, and who is not. And then we apply these definitions as if somehow they're real. Then we focus our attention as law-abiding citizens on those who are not law-abiding, therefore deflecting attention away from our own behavior. So we engage in bad behavior, you better believe it. The people who have hurt you the most, are you serious? Are the people that love you? Are the people in your family? The people who have assaulted you, and we say it's not assault, they were giving me discipline, they spanked me, I turned out okay. Could you have turned out better, right? If you go into your workplace and you rip off your belt and you say, you know what, I don't like what you were doing here at work. I didn't like the way you ate that sandwich. You should have shared the sandwich. Whap! So you spank your coworker. Baby, you're going to jail. But if your little 4-year-old engages in behavior, it's perfectly acceptable for you to whack them with the belt because you're giving them discipline. I think what we're doing, we can socially construct a context in which we normalize violence. And we pass on the violence as if it's somehow normalized, right? And then that person, let's take a look at it. Let me go this direction for just a second. Our common sense says that the Department of Homeland Security must protect us from terrorism. That's a big deal, right? No terrorist attacks. In a given year, there are roughly 14 terrorist homicides in the United States. Now, they're globally, it's a different distribution. But within the United States, ever since 9/11, we basically say, okay, we got to protect ourselves from terrorists. And there are terrorist cells in the United States. And in a given year, they kill on average 14. And if you take the 3,000 from 9/11 and you divide that out over the last 20 years, 3,000, that's 150. So let's say now that we have 165 on average. Let's say 200, right? So we spent $2 trillion coming out of 9/11 to fight a war on terrorism. $2 trillion that was pulled out of Social Security, okay? Watch this. That is designed to fight and to protect us from 150 homicides. Last year, 365 children were killed by their parents and their guardians. Where was that on the news? Where was that? If something happens with ISIS, we're all over it. Al-Qaeda does something? Oh yeah, we got that one down. But let a slew of parents go ahead and kill their kids, and there's no news on that, right? We don't talk about that as terror. Look, if you want to know what terror is, because I grew up in terror. I was terrorized as a kid. I was always afraid. I was always afraid of getting beaten. Every day I woke up, I was waiting to see who in my household was going to get murdered. Was it going to be Mama Green, Guy? Was it going to be Daddy Green? These are all the people who raised me. Was it going to be my mother? Was it going to be Irma Jean? Was it going to be me? So every day I was waiting to see where the explosion was going to go. And I had nowhere to turn. Who am I going to tell? Yeah, I'm at school. Well, I think someone's going to get killed in my house. You don't do it, right? You keep it to yourself. When I was real little, I was knocked unconscious. I couldn't even talk yet, but I could barely walk. And I got flung across the room. My head hit the wall. I was knocked unconscious. I went to the hospital and all this kind of stuff. Those kids who die, that wasn't the first time that they were abused. It's not the first time they were shaken. It's not the first time they were backhanded. Usually, when they die, it's about the 5th or 6th time that it happens, right? So that child who's unable to communicate their fear to anyone, because they don't even have the language capacity yet, lives in absolute terror of the very people that surround them. So our philosophy is we should watch out for Al-Qaeda and ISIS. I'm not saying we shouldn't. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we shouldn't direct resources in that direction. What I am saying is that if we really want to take a look at terrorism, and that is the fear of harm, then we really should be taking a look at the little kids who are being pulverized. Because for the 350 that get killed, how many didn't get killed? How many get beaten? How many of them? And you don't have to get beaten to be destroyed, do you? I don't think so. All you have to be doing is called stupid by your parents, dumb, ignorant, sexually provocative and promiscuous. You get called those things enough, it's going to have an impact on your self-esteem, right? So when we take a look at terror, it is very interesting in my perspective to take a look at how do we socially construct the definition, right? And what does our common sense perspective say as to what terror is and who's terrorized? If we redefine things and looked at them from a different angle, we would certainly come up with different policies and different ways of looking at the world. And my job is to have you look at the world in a different way, because I believe that you have been socialized to look at the world in a particular way, right? I can't recall, because I have so many classes I teach, I can't recall if I had you do Who Am I, right? But if I did, and I think I'll look it up. Well, where are my notes? I don't know if I did that with you guys. But in any case, in most classes I say, who am I? And you say, I am a son. I am a daughter. I am a father. I am a teacher. I'm an employee. And I have people list 25 of them. What was really interesting in my human behavior class and in my social environment classes, I had them do it for sure. The first three things they listed, almost every single one of them, was I am a daughter, I am a sister, I am a student. Basically in that order. So in other words, when we take a look at who am I, we look at it from a family perspective, typically to start with. I know when I do who am I always think in terms of me being a father to my daughters. So I define myself really as a father. So when you say you're a father, or you say you're a daughter, or you say you're a son, or you say you're an employee, what you're really saying is that who you are and what you are is a role, an R-O-L-E, right? You occupy a role, you play a role. And when you play that role, okay, there are sets of expectations for your behavior. There are rules for your behavior. There are guidelines for your behavior. Culture says basically how you should play that role, that role, right? So in other words, when you play a role, something amazing happens. It fits you into society, because now you have a defined relationship as to what it is to be in association with somebody else. It's defined by that role. Now the one thing I forgot to ask, because I didn't want to make it more complicated than what it was, when you play a role, here's what's amazing. You have an emotional response to that role, right? Because the rules and the expectations play down upon who you are and the way you see yourself in the world. And so if you're seeing yourself in the world in a particular way, right, then that role is going to define the way in which you express the emotions, how you feel the emotions, and the emotions that you feel. So when I play the role of father, I always feel happy, I always feel joy, but I always feel concerned. And the reason is because I always want what's best for my kids, right? When I have other parents in my class, guess what they say? I feel happy, I feel concerned, I feel frustrated. In other words, the emotional experience that I have as being a father is very similar to the emotional experience that other parents have. So we go around saying, well, I'm a unique individual. I'm unique. You're not unique. You're just a system of roles. Everything you do is based upon the role that you occupy at a particular point in time. That's all you are. Right? Right now you're playing the role of student, I'm playing the role of teacher. Right? And based upon that, there are rules and expectations of what we're supposed to be doing. And a live class would be vastly different, right? The context would be different. But there are expectations. Then you leave that and you're with your friends. Then you have expectations. Then you go to work, expectations. So in other words, who you are, what you are, changes with every role relationship that you have, within every context in which you operate. Which means what? Which means, oh God, I'm losing people. Here's what it means. It means that you don't exist. You only exist in relationship to others. You only exist in the role that you occupy. And when you occupy it, we come to define that context as real, including our emotions. So you're not necessarily unique, you're very similar to other people. So why is all this important? Right? Because I'm really talking, and I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm talking. If you go back and look at, and I suggest that you do this because it's really critical for this class. As a matter of fact, it's essential for this class because all the theories that are in the textbook, the SAS students have the theories from the textbook. If you're not in SAS, then you have then what you have is Ray Sikora's book, and you have this book that I wrote, right? So either you have this and Ray Sikora's book if you're not in SAS, but if you are in SAS, then you have the main textbook. Either way, the theories are the same, right? Doesn't matter which one you use. Theories are theories. They're used to describe the world. So what I'm about to explain is critical for you to understand any of these theories that you're going to be reading about. Doesn't matter what the source is, you're going to be reading about it. Right, so here it is. If you go watch that video, it's a 6 or 8 minute video, and it's called Who Am I? Right? In that video, you have on the top of a chart, let me figure out where the camera is. You have on the top of the chart, it says economic system, political system, family, education, religion, media. Those are what you call social institutions. A social institution is a stable cluster of social structures designed to meet basic human needs. And I'll repeat that. A social institution is a stable cluster of social structures designed to meet basic human needs. Right? The economic system delivers to us goods and services. The political system distributes power. The family system socializes. The education system passes on knowledge. The media provides information. Policing establishes justice and the distribution of law and order. So you take all the institutions and the way they work together, right? They're overlapping systems working together, creates for us what we call society. Society is a system of overlapping institutions, right? Whew. Didn't know I was going to cover all this, did you? Okay. So you have all these institutions working together to create society. Those, and you can go look this up. I got the video on it. Go watch it. It's embedded in one of your announcements. Then you have opportunity structure. So society produces opportunity structures. From those opportunity structures come social networks. Out of social networks come the small groups that you interact with. And those small groups define you. All right? You are defined by the small groups with whom you interact with. Society creates the opportunity structures. Opportunity structures create the social networks. From those networks come the small groups that you operate with. And then who you are, what you are, the way you identify yourself, your self-definition emerges from the small groups, the people you interact with. So what does that mean? Society creates the context in which you operate. Society creates the context, right? And the opportunity, the context, the opportunity structure is your, what is called social placement. How you are placed in the opportunity structure will have a direct impact on your life outcome, your quality of life. So if you are going to an Ivy League school, let's say you want to be president of the United States, it's going to be really tough because, one, you had to have almost always had to go to an Ivy League school. So if you're not going into an Ivy League school, it's going to be really hard for you to become president of the United States. Two, almost every president of the United States is a multimillionaire, right? So if we're taking a look at social placement, you might have this dream to become the president, and you can be. I mean, you can go from rags to riches and become president. I mean, that's fine. However, your social placement is going to determine or at least impact the way in which you end up living your life. Okay? So the opportunity structure, your relationship to the opportunity structure is going to be based upon your networks. Now, your networks are vital, baby. Your networks are vital. Remember I was talking about street gangs before? Let's say you want to go to law school, which helps you become president. Let's say you want to go to law school, and you have to have 3 letters of recommendation. You're a Crip from South Central LA. And the only 3 real people you have that you're really close to in your network are other Crips. OG Bobby Johnson, Monster Cody Scott, Kilo. These are real people, right? So what are you going to do? Have Monster Cody Scott write you a letter of recommendation, go to law school? You think you're going to get into USC? Or do you think that if your parents are friends with an attorney and you get an internship in the summer, and now you have an attorney who gave you an internship write you a letter, and you become close to a professor that you have in college, and then you have a job along the way where they employed you and they believed in you, and you get these 3 letters of recommendation, which one is going to be more likely to get you into law school? The 3 from your network, from the Crips, or the ones from the quote-unquote legitimate end of society? So if we take a look at opportunity structure, your social networks is what puts you into the system, baby. And here's what you do. This drives me crazy. I'm glad we're not in a live class for this part. Here you go. You're sitting in class, you're doing this. Texting people you already know. Last semester, I was about ready to run my head into a wall. I've been here lecturing in class, talking about stuff that's important, I think is important. And I said, what do you think about this? I forget the woman's name. She said, you made me miss my shot. I said, what do you mean I made you miss? She's playing billiards on her phone. She's playing pool. I'm like, you're playing pool? Put the phone down. And then I started getting agitated, right? People are playing pool on the phone. They're playing what these games are called. And they're texting people that they already know. Let me tell you something. While you're sitting there texting people who are already in your network, and you're struggling to make ends meet, that person isn't helping you accomplish your goals. So while we continue to reproduce our networks with people that may in fact get us to the next level or not, you're not building relationships with people who could, right? So when I take a look at networks, networks are your entry point into the opportunity system. And I think about this. Hold on a second, let me grab a sip. All right. Your network, you ever play that game? You probably haven't, you may be too young. But there's a game called The 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. In other words, whose hand do you have to shake to meet anybody in the world? And they say that we're all within 6 handshakes away from anybody. Well, me personally, I'm not anything special, but I'm 2 handshakes away from any president in the United States. I'm 2 handshakes away from Donald Trump. I'm 2 handshakes away from Barack Obama. And the reason is really simple. It's nothing I did in particular. But my best friend in high school, his name was Eric. And he went to Columbia, so he went to an Ivy League school. And it ended up he's now one of the lead attorneys, real estate attorneys in the state of Colorado. He had a brother named Brian who ended up having a TV show in South Korea, syndicated show. Now he's a restaurant owner in Las Vegas. We had a guy named Ted Chung. And Ted Chung, this is our carpool. Every day from high school we'd go home and here's the people in the carpool. Ted Chung ended up becoming the Attorney General for the state of Illinois. His brother Peter, the youngest brother, he is now the Vice President of Structured Investments for Goldman Sachs. The other brother is the lead civil engineer for the state of New Jersey. And Eric had a sister named Michelle. And Michelle went to Harvard. She went to the School of Public Policy, the Kennedy School of Public Policy, and got her master's degree. She ended up becoming the superintendent of the Washington, D.C. school system. She was the only non-African American to become the superintendent of that system. And she was a South Korean woman, right? She received national attention. She was brought in specifically, hand chosen by the mayor at the time. I can't remember his name. This back in 2008, 2009. She came in and she became extremely controversial. She fired people who couldn't be fired. She closed down schools that were ineffective, and she just basically said, they said, well, why would you, our teachers the problem? And she said, no, teachers are the solution. We just need people who want to teaching these classes. And she went in and she became very controversial. Got on the cover of Time magazine in 2009. Was interviewed by Oprah Winfrey. Now she's good friends with Oprah Winfrey. She married an NBA All-Star from the Phoenix Suns, Kevin Johnson. Now they own a string of restaurants. Well, here's what's interesting about Michelle. Michelle, during the debate between John McCain and Barack Obama back in 2012, in that debate, I've never seen this before and I haven't seen it since, both of them admitted in the debate that Michelle was doing a great job as a superintendent of the Washington, D.C. school system. And both of them said that if they get elected president, they were going to invite her to be the Secretary of Education in the United States. As a matter of fact, Barack Obama did invite her to be Secretary of Education. She said no, because she didn't think she had enough experience. When Donald Trump got elected, Donald Trump also asked her to be the Secretary of Education. Instead, he chose Betsy DeVos because Michelle did not want the job, right? She wanted to build her family. Well, think about that. All I got to do is say, hey, Michelle, what's going on? I know her as a kid, right? I know that she's the combination of her mom and her dad. She's very funny, laid back. That's her dad. Very stern and stringent, and I'm going to go get you, is her mom, right? And I take a look at them. Michelle and I had the exact same philosophy on education, right? Great teachers should be teaching. You should pay them for it, right? The difference was they went to boarding school in the summer, Ivy League schools for college, and I cut their grass. I had to cut their grass so that I could have money to pay for my high school education, right? You see the difference? It's that opportunity structure. It's the network. Father got them in because the father was a doctor and he was a professor at University of Michigan, right? I'm glad he was a professor, but he could have been a professor at University of Toledo. I'd have had more respect. Then the mother owned a boutique store where the dresses were $500 and $600 per dress, which now is $2,000 or $3,000 in the same price mode. So we take a look at the point of entry in the networks. They had advantages strictly because of their social position in the network. Now, what does all that mean? What does all that mean? People. If there's one thing that you get from this class this semester, is that there are two purposes here. Purpose number one, right, is to learn the communication skills so that you can advance in your lifetime. It's not the concepts. Yeah, we're going to go over social control theory and social disorganization. We're going to go through all that. All right, that's going to happen. Those of you in SAS, we're going to cover all those things in the textbook. You got to develop your communication skills. That's one. Number two, you got to build your social networks, baby. If you have a dream of what you want your life to look like, then your number one job is to cut people off your team that bring you down. If you don't get those people off your team that bring you down, that call you names, that deride you, that make you question what you're dressing, make you question who you're associating with, and then you have a dream and they laugh at your dream, you need to get them off the team immediately. And if you're in an abusive situation where it's really not so easy to get out of, you go seek me out and I'll help you get out of that situation. Use your resources, because the people who are going to hold you back are the ones who are closest to you. You watch, as you get older, it's the one that you think is a friend that is not the friend at all. They're the ones talking behind your back, right? So what do you have to do? You need to build your team with people who will edify you. They will stand by you. They will build you up. And in a public place, they will never denigrate you. Maybe in private, they'll constructively criticize, but in public, they're always on your team. You have to have people out there who are willing to take a risk on you. Now, you have to have people who have your emotional support, put them on the team. You need some people who have financial support, put them on the team. You have people who you need for spiritual support, you better put them on the team. And the people who bring you down, the people who don't have the same aspirations and drive to get to where you want to go, you got to say, hey, you know what, you're friends of mine, but I got to put you over here on the bench. Because my starting team has to be a group of people who are great. The founder of Starbucks, that's what he said. He said, I'm not a very smart guy, Schultz. He said, I'm not very smart. I just surrounded myself with people who were smarter than me. And it became the #1 coffee company in the world, right? That's what you need to do. Because you need to build your team to place you into the social system. If society creates the context, then it is the people, your network, that are the resources to shape the direction of your life. Now watch this. Now I'm going to get a little bit happy. I wish I could type this out. All right. Well, here, let me do this. Here's a word for you. If you go look at that same diagram, right? If we look at all the people you've ever met, we can definitely say that you are an outcome of all those human beings you ever met. You don't remember every exchange. You don't remember exactly necessarily what you learned. You don't remember it, okay? But it happened. You don't remember every single time your parents taught you a new word. You don't remember. You can't, right? But it shaped you nonetheless. So what that word is that you are an outcome of all the phenomenon. Where is it? There it is. You're an outcome of all the phenomenon that ever occurred to you, that ever happened. The word is called phenomenology, right? So if your humanness is standing here, all the phenomenon that ever happened, right? All the phenomenon that ever happened shaped the way in which you interpret the world today. Your common sense is phenomenological. It is an outcome of all those experiences through your personal history, all right? That's one part of it, your phenomenology. All these phenomena shape the way in which you interpret the world. That's where your common sense comes from. Common sense is a phenomenological outcome. Now, we were talking about who do we judge as troublemakers? Who do we judge as people who are law-abiding? Who do we see as this and who do we see as that, right? When we say that group's a troublemaker and they're law-abiding citizens, right? That is using categories to predict what people are going to do, right? And that's what we use. We use categories. That person is crazy, they're a threat, all right? They're not crazy, we can change them, right? Categories is what we call ethnomethodology. The use of categories to define human behavior is ethnomethodology. The word ethno means of the world. Methodology means the way in which we study the world. And we use categories to define who's a threat from who is not. And the media shapes our phenomenological view. All right? So here's where it gets interesting to me. So society shapes the context in which you interact. But the phenomenology, the phenomenon, and the socialization is the way in which you interpret the context. So society shapes everything. You didn't create the capitalist system. You couldn't create the capitalist system. It existed before you. It will exist after you die. You didn't create Christianity. You didn't create mass education. You didn't create democracy, but they will exist before you and after you. Why? Because they're institutionalized. However, your belief in their reality is from all the phenomenology that you've learned through your life. When we normalize certain systems as real and appropriate and normative, that's because the phenomenon has shaped us. All right? Now, why is all this important? Here's the reason why. I believe all people are inherently good and all people are inherently bad. Every last one of us. I believe that. All right? I believe in the right context, anybody can kill. And I believe in the right context, anyone can heal. Right? I believe anyone can thrive. Why do I know people can kill? Because I'm not a killer. But you try to harm my daughters, tell you what, we're gonna have something going on. Right? If I think I might be harmed and it becomes between you and me, it's possible I may go ahead and defend myself, right? If I become a soldier and I'm indoctrinated into fighting to protect democracy at home, I may kill somebody that I don't know, right? It may be defined as appropriate, but we're capable, all right? So, it's the context in which we define whether or not we behave in one way or another, okay? And here's what I know. My mother didn't want me. My mother was poor. My mother was brutally abused as a little girl. I mean, she was abused in ways that those of you who, oh, you're not going to read Dear Mama, you're not going to read my autobiography. She was beaten with cords every day, with irons, with the cord from an iron. She was coat hangers. My mom was literally ironed with an iron. You know, she had her head jammed into a coal-burning furnace just so she would be quiet, and if she made a noise, my grandmother threatened to put her whole body in with my uncle, and just grotesque type of thing. So she wasn't capable of having a son, right? Especially an unexpected son. I was a total accident. I'm not gonna lie to you. My father, who was a musician, he was a famous musician in Northwest Ohio and Southeast Michigan. He was friends with Stevie Wonder back in the 1960s, and he wrote songs for Stevie, and he had a touring symphony, and women sometimes, men sometimes like musicians. They like performers, and things happen, and then here comes Sean. Right? Oh, here he is. There he is. Oh, there. Well, my mom wasn't ready. She was poor. She just got her first job. She lived at that time in a storage room at a pizza parlor, okay? And so she definitely wasn't ready. However, Bertha Green, Mama Green, the woman who raised me, was an African-American woman, and my mom was standing on a heating grate at Mama Green's house. And back then, we didn't have gas heat. We had coal heat. We didn't have a shower. We had a bathtub. We didn't have a garage opener. We opened it up by ourselves, right? We didn't have a paved driveway. It was filled with rocks, right? We were poor, right? And we lived in the inner city. And I was surrounded by violence. The neighborhood was violent. My home was violent. I never knew when I was going to be attacked. And if you read that book, you'll see I was attacked all the time. There's several events where I'm surprised I'm still even here based upon some of the things that took place, right? So anyhow, my mom is standing there crying. Irma Jean is her best friend. That's Mama Green's daughter. And Mama Green comes up from the basement after putting the coal in the furnace, and she says, "Irma Jean, why is Susie crying?" "Well, Mama, she's pregnant, and she doesn't know whether she's going to have an abortion or whether she's going to adopt the baby out, but she can't raise the baby on her own. She's too poor," and all this kind of stuff. And Mama Green looked over at my mom, and she goes, "Susie," she says, "let me tell you a little story." She goes, if a female dog has a litter of puppies and they don't have a home, that female dog will go find a home for those puppies and will carry each puppy by the scruff of its neck until every single one of those puppies is home. Susie, if you don't keep your baby, you'll be lower than that dog that took care of its puppies. However, I know, Susie, that you are poor. I know you're single. I know you're alone. So me and Leo, who is Daddy Green, Mama Green's husband, we will raise your son for you. Right? You don't have to pay us. We'll raise him. And so the first 12 years of my life, my mother worked night shift, so I couldn't stay with her. I stayed with Mama Green and Daddy Green until he died when I was 8. And at that point, I was going to a great private school, and I was very influential in my neighborhood, especially in sports, right? And I helped people out. And then I magically ended up becoming a teacher. I started teaching when I was 20 years old at Denison. I was actually a lecturer for Bahram Tabacolian when I was 20 years old. So when I was your age, I was actually teaching college. And then when I was 21, I got into Ohio State, and we had our own sections to teach. So I was teaching my own sections when I was 21 years old. So, since 1987, I've been teaching, which is pretty incredible, right? 33 years of it. Well, let me tell you something. I cannot tell you how many students I've had who were in street gangs that asked me to help them get out of the gang. I can't tell you how many people I had who were trafficking drugs that I helped get them a job so they couldn't traffic drugs anymore. I cannot even begin to tell you the number of students who confessed to me their desire to kill themselves, the desire to end their life, suicidal ideation. I had one guy who had a shotgun in his mouth the night before he came to class. And he had green hair and the whole 9 yards, and he came in and he said, "Professor Schwaner, I just wanted to see you teach one more time. I was loaded up on Jack Daniels last night, and I was going to end my life, but I just wanted to see one more class." That's back when I had huge energy. Right? At MDC. I can't tell you how many people's lives were near the end, and they came to me, and I helped them out. Now think about this, phenomenologically and ethnomethodologically. If Mama Green had judged me based upon the category of me being a white male and decided not to raise me, I wouldn't be here, right? So she looked beyond the categories and said, you know what, there's going to be something decent here. And if all those phenomena didn't shape who I was, and she didn't at that moment raise me, right, then my history comes to an end, right? But by her picking me up, by extending her huge hand and lifting me up, I've had the chance to teach 20,000 students in my career. 20,000. I've taught 500 classes at this point in my career. And if you think about the fact that many of them have come back and said, you had a positive impact on my life. You helped me go to law school. You helped me go to graduate school. When I was down, when I was in an abusive situation, you helped me get out. You didn't even know it. If Mama Green doesn't extend her hand to my mother, all those people are still living a different life. History is different. So what does that mean? Each and every one of you watching this live stream has a moral obligation that when you see somebody who is down on their luck or struggling or face down, don't walk by them in disgust. Don't categorize them as somehow some kind of less or more inferior person than you. Extend your hand. Because by extending your hand, you may in fact affect change that you can never imagine, right? You may be the very person. I have a friend named Pratik Multani, he's a cancer researcher. There was a lady in our school that helped him get through school. He was brilliant. I mean, he was going to get through no matter what. But this woman in particular helped all of us. She was a booster, right? Well, he goes to Yale and he's valedictorian. And then he goes to Harvard Medical School where he's also valedictorian. And he gets his medical degree from Harvard. And he is now a world-renowned cancer researcher. Well, she had stage 4 cancer, this mother of a parent that was in our class. He created the very drug that saved her life, right? So if you think about how these things go full circle, you help that person up. You don't know if in destiny that person's going to come back and save your life or save your children's life. And when you think of it in those terms, what that means is that we are interconnected structurally through networks and through society. And we have a social contract with one another that we must uphold because we are constantly in relationship to other people. If you want to fight crime, you got to take a look at it from a different perspective. You got to take a look at it. We are all in the same social contract. We are all shaped by the same structures and the same institutions. And rather than judging this person, just imagine if your economic opportunities were blocked, if the political system said you were a threat, if criminal justice system was looking down upon the group in which you belong to, if the religious institution helped you develop a false consciousness, and the political institution alienated you from the system, if you're blocked from entry into every single institution, do you think it's possible that you may have turned to crime or drugs too? Quit judging people. And understand that we are all very similar because we occupy a role and have an emotional response to our social placement within the networks and institutional system. So if we really want to do something about crime, we take a look at that context in which people operate and remember, always remember this. You, my friend, you matter. And I don't care if you have someone in your life that says you don't matter. You matter to this planet. You matter to this earth. And let me tell you something. Your job is not to get a degree. Learn your communication skills, build your team, and remember this, because I got to get ready for my next class, which starts in 7 minutes. Remember this. All of you have greatness in you. The reason you're going to school is to take the information from the class to build who you are. Can you do that? You're going to come out of here with a great life. Sorry we can't ask questions. The chat board wasn't working, but I hope you enjoyed it today. Hit me with a text if you did enjoy it, or an email or something like that. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. It felt like I was talking to myself, but I could see these concurrent viewers and the likes, and that tells me something. Anyhow, you have your assignment due next week, and the assignment is why or why not. In other words, why would a person commit crime, and why wouldn't they commit crime? Same person. Think it through, write it out. Love you. Have a great week. Sorry, I gotta go. Gotta get ready for my next class.